The first thing that went wrong that morning was the coffee machine, which chose that exact day to emit a smell like burned optimism and then die quietly, as if ashamed. I stood there staring at it, mug in hand, wondering whether machines could sense when they were about to be upstaged by something far more dramatic. I rinsed the mug anyway out of habit, because habits are what keep a person grounded right before reality decides to lift them by the ankles and shake. I was still negotiating with myself about instant coffee when the light through the window changed in a way that didn't belong to any weather system I knew. It wasn't brighter, exactly. It was steadier, as though the sky had reached a decision and intended to stick with it. My phone buzzed on the counter once, twice, then began vibrating like it was trying to escape. Emergency alerts stacked on the screen faster than I could read them. I caught fragments. Unidentified object, airspace violation, remain indoors. This is not a drill, please stay calm, which has never once in human history made anyone calmer. I stepped toward the window and then stopped myself, because curiosity is powerful but survival instincts still have seniority. The building trembled just slightly, like someone clearing their throat before speaking. Somewhere outside, car alarms began arguing with each other. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from my sister, which I ignored on instinct because, if the world was ending, I didn't want to spend the last moments reassuring her while having no useful information myself. I texted instead, "Alive probably, will update." Then the knocking started. Not pounding, not urgent, just a firm, polite knock, as if whoever was on the other side had checked a schedule and decided this was the correct time. I stared at the door, waiting for my brain to supply a reasonable explanation. It offered several unreasonable ones instead. Government agent, cult recruiter, neighbor with opinions. I approached slowly, peered through the peephole and saw absolutely nothing except a vague distortion, like heat rising off pavement. "I don't want any," I said, because it felt safer than silence. A voice answered, not through the door but directly inside my head, clear and carefully enunciated. "Acknowledged. I am not offering any." I froze with my hand on the lock. The voice was female, calm, and carried the unmistakable tone of someone used to being obeyed, but making an effort not to sound bossy about it. It also had a faint resonance, as though the words had traveled a very long distance and were pleased to have arrived intact. "You are communicating with me," the voice continued, "via a localized neural interface. There is no cause for alarm statistically." Statistically, I repeated out loud, because my mouth needed something to do that wasn't screaming. "Yes," the voice said, "individually outcomes vary." I opened the door. The hallway was empty in the way that empty spaces rarely are, the air faintly humming, the walls subtly vibrating as though they were remembering something heavy leaning against them. My neighbor's door was ajar, a shoe lying on its side like it had fainted. The voice spoke again, now accompanied by a shimmer in the air that resolved into a figure standing just outside my threshold. She looked human in the broad, obvious ways, and not human in the details that refused to be ignored. Her ears were long, tapering elegantly back along her head, not grotesque or exaggerated, just different enough that my brain kept circling back to them like a tongue probing a missing tooth. She wore a uniform that suggested authority without explaining itself, and her posture alone implied command structures I had never been part of. "Hello," she said, this time aloud, her mouth moving in sync with the voice in my head. "I am Captain Seelan of the exploratory vessel Kepri. I apologize for the intrusion. You were selected under specific criteria." "Do the criteria include poor life choices?" I asked. She blinked once slowly. "That category is broad." That was when I laughed, a short, sharp sound that surprised both of us. The tension snapped just enough to breathe. "Okay," I said. "Okay, sure, why not? You're an alien." "Yes. And there's a spaceship." "Yes." "And you're here for me." "Yes." I waited for the panic to arrive, for my legs to give out or my vision to tunnel. Instead, My brain latched onto the absurdity like a flotation device. Did you knock on everyone's door, or am I special? You are statistically anomalous, she said. Also, your building has structural vulnerabilities that made individual access more efficient. Great, I muttered. My landlord will love that. She tilted her head slightly, her long ears shifting with emotion. Your humor markers are elevated. That is reassuring. For you or for me? For both, ideally. She gestured behind her, and the hallway wall rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Beyond it was not more hallway, but open space, filled with curved metallic surfaces and soft light that had no visible source. The building groaned, then settled, as though relieved to no longer be pretending this was normal. I am formally requesting, she said, that you come aboard my ship. I looked back at my apartment, at the dead coffee machine, at the mug still sitting uselessly by the sink. I thought of my sister's unanswered call, of the alerts piling up on my phone, of a morning that had already gone irreversibly off script. What happens if I say no? I asked. Captain Seelan considered this. Then I will thank you for your time, depart, and recalibrate several long-term projections regarding interspecies trust. And if I say yes, then, she said, everything becomes more complicated. I stepped forward without thinking, crossing the threshold where the hallway ended and something vast and impossible began. You should really lead with that. Her mouth curved just slightly, noted. The wall closed behind us, and gravity shifted its weight, settling into a balance that felt negotiated rather than imposed. Somewhere deep within the ship, systems awakened, responding to my presence with interest that felt uncomfortably personal. I had the distinct impression that I had just agreed to something that would require paperwork on a cosmic scale. "Welcome aboard," Captain Seelan said. I looked around, then back at her. "Do you validate parking?" She paused. "We can discuss restitution for ground-based conveyances later." "Good," I said, "because I think my car just became an artifact." The ship did not ask my permission before deciding I was interesting. I became aware of this gradually, the way one becomes aware of being watched by a cat that has plans. Every step I took triggered subtle shifts around me, adjustments that felt less like automation and more like curiosity. The floor yielded slightly under my weight, then corrected, as though embarrassed by the reaction. Lights brightened and dimmed in quiet conversation with each other. Somewhere behind the walls, something hummed in a rhythm that did not match any engine I had ever heard, more like a throat being cleared repeatedly while waiting to speak. Captain Seelan walked beside me at an unhurried pace, her attention divided between me and the ship, as though she were introducing two acquaintances and hoping they would get along. I had many questions queued up, all of them fighting for priority, but the one that escaped first surprised me. "Do you always ask random people to come with you?" I said, "or is this a special occasion?" "You are not random," she replied, "and this is not common." That's comforting in a very abstract way. She made a sound that I suspected was amusement, though it carried a precise edge, as if humor were something she handled carefully, like a sharp instrument. "Your species has a tendency to overestimate the role of ceremony in first contact scenarios. You were not summoned. You were invited. Still feels like a lot for a weekday." We reached a wider space where the ship seemed to open up, not revealing anything so much as allowing me to perceive more at once. My balance wobbled for a moment, and then steadied as the gravity adjusted again, compensating for my indecision. I wondered how many species had stumbled exactly like that on their first steps aboard this vessel, and whether the ship remembered all of them. "You may ask your questions," Seelan said. "Your cognitive load is increasing." "I have that effect on myself," I said. "Okay, first question, why me?" She stopped walking. The ship seemed to notice, pausing its quiet movements in solidarity. "Because," she said, "you noticed." "Noticed what?" "The anomaly," she said. "Before we arrived." I searched my memory for something suitably cosmic, and came up with a broken coffee machine and a weird quality of light. I thought that was just a bad morning. It was not, she said. You perceived a phase distortion without instrumentation and categorized it as noteworthy rather than dismissing it. Most humans did not. Most humans were probably still asleep. That was accounted for. I rubbed my face with both hands, grounding myself in the familiar sensation of skin and bone. So you picked me because I'm tired and curious. And because, she added, your psychological profile suggests you adapt to existential stress through humor rather than aggression. Wow, I feel very seen. She inclined her head. It is considered polite. We resumed walking. As we moved, I became aware of other presences aboard the ship, not visually, but as shifts in attention, like walking through a room where conversations pause just long enough to acknowledge you. I resisted the urge to wave at the walls. Second question, I said, are we about to leave Earth? Yes. I stopped again. You could have mentioned that earlier. You did not ask. That feels unfair. Your species has an adversarial relationship with information, she said. We are still calibrating. The floor beneath us vibrated gently, a sensation that traveled up through my legs and settled behind my eyes. I felt pressure then release like the moment an elevator starts moving but longer, smoother. Somewhere deep in my chest, something clenched and then let go. That was it, wasn't it? I said. We're not there anymore. No, she said. We are not. Okay, I said, because saying okay was easier than unpacking the rest of that sentence. Okay, third question, am I going to die? She considered me for a long moment, her long ears shifting subtly as though tuning to a frequency only she could hear. Not as a direct result of this decision, she said. That is a wildly specific reassurance. Accuracy is important. We entered a space that felt central, though nothing about it declared itself as such. My attention was pulled in multiple directions at once, and I realized the ship was offering me options, allowing my perception to choose what it could handle. I focused on Seelan instead, anchoring myself in the one thing that made sense. You said this would make things complicated, I said. For who? For me, she said. For you, for both our peoples. That's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who forgot to buy groceries. Your domestic preparedness is irrelevant. Tell that to my fridge. She paused again, this time turning fully toward me. There is something you should understand, she said. My request was not approved by my superiors. I blinked. Oh, so you're a rebel. I'm a captain, she said, and I am accountable for my outcomes. That sounds like rebel with better paperwork. Her mouth curved again, more noticeably this time. Your language is inefficient but evocative. The ship emitted a soft tone and Seelan responded without looking away from me. Yes, she said, I am aware. What was that? I asked. The ship informing me that your presence is causing minor recursive loops in its predictive models. That sounds bad. It is interesting. Everything you say is interesting in a way that makes me nervous. That is reasonable. She gestured and a surface near us shifted, responding to her intent. Sit, she said. We will talk. I sat, the surface adjusting instantly, molding itself to me with unsettling familiarity. I didn't give it my measurements. It extrapolated. Of course it did. Seelan remained standing, her posture relaxed but alert, like someone used to delivering news that could change lives. Your species stands at a threshold, she said. You are not alone in your system and you are no longer unobserved. Many civilizations have reached this point. Few navigate it without conflict. And you thought, I said slowly, that grabbing one random human was the solution. You continue to misuse the word random, she said, and you misunderstand your role. Enlighten me. You are not a representative, she said. You are a test. I laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the space. Of course I am. Your reaction is consistent, she said. What exactly are you testing? I asked. Besides my tolerance for very weird days. Trust, she said. Adaptability. the capacity to choose cooperation without coercion. That's a lot to hang on a yes or no. Indeed. I leaned back, letting the surface support me fully. You know, on Earth, when someone says this is a test, there's usually a form involved. We have forms, she said. They are extensive. Hard pass. The ship hummed again, louder this time, and I felt a ripple pass through it, like a thought being completed. Seelan glanced upward briefly, then back at me. What now? I asked. Now, she said, we see what you do next. I spread my hands. I asked for a bathroom. She stared at me. I'm kidding, I said quickly. Mostly. That can be arranged, she said. Of course it can. There was a pause, a shared moment of quiet that felt heavier than silence should. I became aware, dimly, of distance unfolding around us, of stars rearranging themselves beyond my perception, of Earth receding into a concept rather than a place. You could still ask to go back, Seelan said, at this stage. I thought of the dead coffee machine, of the hallway that would never look the same again, of a choice already made. What happens if I stay? I asked. She met my gaze, her eyes steady, her long ears held still. Then, she said, we begin something that cannot be undone. I exhaled slowly. You really need a better sales pitch. Noted, she said again. Somewhere within the ship, something settled, as though a decision had been recorded and accepted. I had the strange sensation of being woven into a pattern that had existed long before I knew it was there. Well, I said, I guess we're doing this. Yes, Captain Seelan said, we are. By the time I realized the ship had started treating me less like cargo and more like a bad idea it couldn't take back. Several things had already gone irreversibly sideways, including my understanding of myself. It began with breakfast. I did not ask for breakfast. I was thinking about breakfast in the abstract way humans do when their lives have derailed and routine becomes a comforting myth. The ship responded by producing something that was not eggs but understood eggs on a philosophical level. I stared at it for a long moment. This feels judgmental, I said. The surface beneath the food adjusted its temperature in response, cooling slightly. Somewhere the ship hummed. Captain Seelan watched me with open interest. It is adapting, she said. Your neural patterns indicate nostalgia. For cholesterol. For familiarity. I poked the food, it reconfigured politely. I miss toast. That can be arranged. Everything can be arranged, I said. That's unsettling. It is efficient. Over the course of what the ship insisted on calling days, despite having abandoned any recognizable planetary cycle, I learned that efficiency was the closest thing Seelan's people had to faith. Not in a cold way, but in a reverent one. Systems existed to minimize waste. Conflict was a malfunction, not a moral failing. Trust, I learned, was measurable in probabilities and long-term outcome curves. And somehow, inexplicably, I was altering those curves. It started small. A suggestion here, a question there, an observation that wasn't in the models because it relied on gut feeling, which their simulations struggled with the way a calculator struggles with poetry. I asked why certain protocols existed. I asked what would happen if they didn't. I asked why everything assumed the worst version of an unknown instead of the most interesting one. You assume benevolence, Seelan said once, not accusingly. No, I said, I assume chaos, but friendly chaos. She considered that for a long time. The first message from Earth arrived sooner than expected, routed through channels I didn't know existed until they did. Governments were panicking in very organized ways. Scientists were arguing with enthusiasm. My sister had sent 17 messages, the last of which simply read, "Are you with the aliens, yes or no?" Yes, I typed back. Also hi. The ship monitored the transmission, not intrusively, but attentively like a chaperone pretending not to listen. Seelan stood beside me, hands clasped behind her back. You could let them speak to me, she said. Officially. And say what? I asked. Hello, we borrowed a human, please don't freak out. That is imprecise. Welcome to Earth diplomacy. When the first joint communication took place, it was awkward in ways that transcended species. Humans wanted assurances. Sealand's people wanted projections. I sat between them, figuratively and occasionally literally, translating intent more than language. "No," I said at one point, rubbing my temples. "When they say, 'What are your intentions?' they don't mean it like that. They mean, 'Are you going to hurt us?' We have not modeled a scenario where harm produces optimal outcomes," Sealand said calmly. "Lead with that." Humor became my weapon of choice, not because the situation was funny, but because laughter lowered defenses faster than logic ever could. I made jokes about abduction clauses and interstellar parking violations. I compared human politicians to particularly loud birds. Against all odds, it worked. Trust ticked upward, not universally, not smoothly, but measurably. The subplot I hadn't seen coming involved the ship itself. At some point, it stopped correcting me when I spoke to it. At first, I thought this was politeness. Then I realized it was anticipation. The ship began completing my requests before I finished articulating them, adjusting environmental variables based on my mood, nudging conversations toward resolution instead of escalation. "It's learning from you," Sealand said. "I'm not a great role model," I said. "Neither are we," she replied. "That is the point." The crisis, when it came, arrived not with violence but with data. Another civilization had noticed Earth. Less patient, more hierarchical, their models placed humanity firmly in the resource category. Negotiations were not their preference. Sealand's superiors demanded withdrawal, observation only. Let the outcome resolve itself. Sealand disagreed. I disagreed louder. "This is exactly the moment you don't step back," I said. "This is when you show up." "Intervention violates accords," one of her superiors said, their voice echoing through the chamber. "So does extinction," I said, "and you know it." Silence followed. Calculations ran. Probabilities clashed. Sealand looked at me then, really looked, her long ears angled forward in a way I'd come to recognize as focus. "You have changed the parameters," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "I am not." The decision, when it came, bore her signature. We didn't win through superior technology. We won through unpredictability. Through alliances formed faster than expected. Through humans doing what they do best when backed into a corner, improvising wildly and daring the universe to keep up. I watched Earth's representatives speak with a confidence they hadn't known they had, bolstered by the quiet presence of something vast and patient at their side. I watched Sealand argue not from dominance, but from precedent, from demonstrated cooperation. When it was over, when the threat recalculated and withdrew, when the future bent just enough to allow something new to grow, I felt something settle inside me. Relief, yes, but also loss. My role diminished naturally after that. The test concluded, the variable stabilized. "You could stay," Sealand said once, standing with me in a space the ship used when it wanted privacy. "There is value in you beyond this moment." I considered it, the endless horizon.